Look at the spec sheets of Japan's greatest cars from the 1990s.
The Nissan Skyline GTR, 276 horsepower. The Toyota Supra, 276.
The Honda NSX, the Mazda RX-7, the Nissan 300ZX. All of them, the exact same number.
276 horsepower. Every single one.
That is not a coincidence. It is one of the strangest agreements in car history.
For 15 years, Japan's carmakers all told the same lie.
They all claimed the same power. And almost none of it was true.
This is the story of a number that was never real.
A quiet handshake that no one was supposed to talk about.
And how a lie about horsepower
accidentally created the greatest cars Japan ever built. To understand it, go back to the late 1980s.
Japan was booming.
Its economy was at the peak of a historic bubble.
And its car industry was exploding with money and ambition.
The cars were getting fast, very fast. Turbochargers, all-wheel drive, advanced electronics. Each company was chasing the next big power figure.
A horsepower race was building between the brands.
But there was a problem. On Japan's roads, speeds were climbing. And so were traffic accidents. Newspapers ran stories about the dangers of speed. Officials talked about limiting fast cars by law. The makers feared heavy regulation was coming. A handshake between them looked safer than a crackdown. Better to police themselves quietly than to let outsiders do it for them.
The government grew worried. The public grew worried.
There was real pressure to slow things down. So in 1989, the carmakers did something unusual. Through their industry association, they made a quiet deal. No law was passed. Nothing was signed in public. It was a gentleman's agreement. A handshake between fierce rivals. And the deal was simple. No manufacturer would advertise a car with more than 280 metric horsepower.
In the numbers most of the world uses, that is about 276.
From that day on, no matter how fast the car really was, the brochure would never claim more than that. And here is where it gets interesting. The agreement capped the number on paper. It did not cap the actual engines. So the carmakers kept building more and more powerful cars. They just kept printing the same figure in the brochure.
276. Again and again and again.
Independent tests told a very different story. Put many of these cars on a dyno, and they made far more than the claim.
Some Skyline GTRs measured well over 300 at the wheels.
Which means even more at the engine itself.
The number on the page had become a polite fiction.
Everyone knew it was not true. The buyers knew. The magazines knew. The companies knew about each other.
It was an open secret, shared across an entire industry.
A whole country agreed to underreport its own horsepower. And kept a straight face for 15 years.
But this strange lie had a side effect.
An accidental and glorious side effect. And it changed everything about how these cars were built. Think about what the agreement actually did. If every rival is forced to claim the same horsepower, then horsepower can no longer be your selling point. You simply cannot win on the brochure. So the engineers had to compete somewhere else. And compete they did, everywhere else. Instead of chasing a bigger headline number, they poured the money into everything you could not see on paper. Handling, braking, grip, balance. All-wheel drive systems of incredible complexity. Gearboxes, chassis, and aerodynamics. And engines built far stronger than the claim required. This is the real secret of the era.
These cars were over-engineered on purpose.
The makers had spare ambition, and nowhere official to spend it. They could not brag about power. So they built quality into the parts no advertisement could show. Nissan gave the Skyline its Atessa all-wheel drive system, plus four-wheel steering and a racing-bred engine. Honda built the NSX from aluminium, and tuned it with help from a Formula One legend. Mazda gave the RX-7 sequential twin turbochargers. Toyota built the Supra's engine like a piece of industrial machinery. Each of these systems cost a fortune to develop. But none of it could be advertised as horsepower. So the badge stayed modest while the engineering went wild. The Skyline could fire itself out of a corner like nothing else. The NSX handled like a car costing 3 times as much. The RX-7 was so light and sharp it felt alive.
Each one a monster hiding behind the same modest number.
Nothing shows this better than the engines.
Take Toyota's Straight 6, the famous 2JZ. On paper, in the Supra, it made 276.
In reality, it was built like a tank. The thick iron block, massively strong internal parts. Far tougher than a modest road car would ever need.
Why build it so strong, for so little claimed power? Because the claim was a fiction, and the engineers knew it.
They built for the real future, not for the brochure. Years later, the tuners discovered the truth. That same engine could handle enormous power.
Some pushed it past 1,000 horsepower.
On its original factory bottom end.
The same was true of Nissan's RB26 in the GTR.
Built for racing, calm down on paper, monstrous underneath. In Japan, a whole tuning industry grew around them. Workshops turned these cars into street legends. A Supra could be built faster than almost any supercar. For the price of the parts, not the badge on the back. The engines simply took the abuse again and again. Strength the brochure never dared to mention. These engines became legends in the tuning world. Not despite the agreement, because of it. The cap pushed all that strength underground. Down into the metal where no marketing department could reach. And that is why, decades later, these are some of the most worshipped engines ever made. The agreement shaped more than the machines. It shaped a whole culture around them. Because the official numbers meant nothing. Fans stopped trusting brochures completely. They trusted dyno sheets, lap times, real results.
A culture of testing and tuning grew up around the lie.
If you wanted the truth, you measured it yourself. Magazines ran their own tests and printed the real figures. Tuners chased numbers the factories pretended not to have. The gap between the claim and reality became the whole game. And the cars earned a reputation for being underrated. Buy one, and it was always faster than the paper promised. A pleasant surprise, engineered into a whole generation of cars. Few industries have ever agreed to sell themselves short. Japan did it on purpose for 15 years straight.
So how did it finally end?
Slowly and then all at once. By the early 2000s, the world had changed. Foreign rivals were advertising huge power figures.
Japanese makers, stuck at 276, looked weak on paper.
Even though their cars absolutely were not. The agreement was now hurting them in the showroom.
In 2004, one company finally broke ranks.
Honda released a car openly rated above the cap. Its luxury sedan, the Legend, with a bigger number printed proudly. Once one had broken the agreement, it was over. The others quickly followed. The numbers were free again.
And almost overnight, the figures jumped. Cars that had always claimed 276
were suddenly advertised with their real, higher power.
The polite fiction was finally over.
But look at what the agreement left behind. For 15 years, it forced a generation of engineers to compete on everything except the headline number. And the result was a golden age.
Cars so well built, so deeply over-engineered,
that the world is still chasing them today.
The Skyline GTR, the Supra, the NSX, the RX-7.
Icons, every single one. Worth small fortunes now, decades after they were new. People pay supercar money for these old coupes.
A clean R34 GTR can cost more than a new sports car.
Low-mileage Supras change hands for staggering sums. The NSX is now celebrated as a true modern classic. values that would have seemed insane when they were new. All for cars that once claimed such a humble number. The market finally priced in the truth. Not for the horsepower on the brochure. For everything the makers hid underneath it. The agreement was meant to slow Japan down. Instead, it quietly made its cars immortal.
A lie about horsepower.
Turned into the most beloved era of performance Japan ever had.
276. The most famous number that was never true.
And the strange, brilliant reason. These cars will never be forgotten.